Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Lucid, and I am once again joined by Sai.
This is Sai, and I'm once again joining Lucid for another exciting turn where we have an actual very serious war breaking out. Judging by the battles, it looks like Vaettiheim's under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, there's Vaettiheim, you can see occupying some space on the left-hand column, which is nice, but still primarily situated on the right-hand side, meaning he's being attacked rather than attacking. And yeah, we have, TNG is also getting involved here too. We don't see really many TNG fights yet. We have one down here with Arithia, but they should be getting involved rather shortly, so that'll be interesting as well.
Yeah, they had their naps ticking down because they basically had just ended their war with Pangea, and then they're basically just immediately resuming hostilities.
Yeah, okay. So message here from TNG. I've had the realization that we're getting to the point in the game where we need to be very careful about how we use thugs. For a different reason than the usual, most armies have thugs to counter them, or have thug counters in them. TNG's thug chassis are extremely valuable to other nations if charmed. Soul Vortex capable Death 2 Air 1s are living Wailing Winds casters, thus not targetable by Ravenous Swarm. And Earth 2 dudes have forge bonuses, so the first several that an opponent steals are worth 1 gem per turn each. That's an important consideration, I suppose.
Yeah, they're also a lot harder to steal via seduction just because they have very high base morale. So if you are going to be stealing them, it's going to be via charm rather than seduction. Like you can still do charm assassins and similar things, but those are very expensive by comparison. Whereas just having your end casters on advance and cast as part of a counter raiding squad is cheap and easy and a great way to snag thugs.
Yeah, and that's certainly something that Pangea can do pretty easily. Both the seduction and the... Oh yeah, Gaff can do it too. But Gaff doesn't really border TNG. The Gaff-TNG war will just be like an artillery war.
Yeah.
Relatedly, I really want to steal an ABBA from Gaff. This is the last turn of the NAP countdown with Pangea and Gaff. From what we hear, Vaettiheim killed a Zabalba stack this turn, but the Bats have a blood discount side, and Vaetti doesn't have big forts. I'm curious if they prove able to take infrastructure just through being in several places. Certainly, Vaettiheim looks a lot smaller this turn, but I'm expecting some pretty fierce counter raiding. I only wish that the blood hunting provinces didn't make it so hard to scout. We'll have to wait for the YouTube series to see the details of the raiding war.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about having a blood economy is just incidentally you're patrolling a lot of your provinces. So like if you surround a province with something that you want to hide with blood hunting provinces, it doesn't even look suspicious, right? Because of course they're going to be patrolling everywhere because they've got blood hunting going on.
Yeah, I've got a game where I'm doing some very strategic patrolling to keep people from seeing a particular province. But yeah, it's a nice thing about being a blood nation. Okay, and so then we have a message here from Gath as well. Another huge Zabalba loss is very painful. So now it's essentially becoming a 2v2 for the most part, with TNG and Vaettiheim not really being allied.
He's not counting Arithia in that, though. So even if Zabalba's out, Arithia is on their side as well. So it really is a 4v2.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think Zabalba's out. They've been punched really hard. But Zabalba was up a ton of territory in raiding. And that raiding war may as well still continue. We'll have to see what happens. It's also possible Zabalba chooses to peace out. But I think with the pressure and being on the foresight of a coalition, they're probably just going to stick to it.
Yeah, it makes sense to just keep trying to grab more land. Because Zabalba's not really going to be able to invade you back.
Right. And peace would probably come with returning to original borders, which,
you don't need to do.
Probably doesn't want. Yeah. Zabalba does have some steam left and maybe a couple hundred more Aussies, but they just don't seem to work with no research. That said, he could have won the fight if he could do Will of the Fates, because a lot of the Vaettiheim stuff routed, and he could just win off of Wailing Winds. He could have also just done Blood Rain, which he certainly has to make routing easier, but alas.
Yeah, I was surprised that we didn't see that.
Yeah. It's also, well, no, I was going to say it's possible there was assassinations and stuff too, but I think this was the turn they were moving on to the fort, so it's unlikely anything was kind of disrupted there.
Right. And
Um,
anything that Shivalba wants to bring in, they can bring in from fairly far away, and even stealth that if they're worried about getting assassinated.
yeah,
And given that we know that they've got the Anakis out, those guys should be able to do Blood Rain very easily. I think all of them are Blood 3.
right. And you don't have to worry about, a lot of times, even if, like, maybe if you're playing a living nation, you put Blood Rain and Wailing Winds up, and because you have Wailing Winds, Blood Rain's really good, but your stuff will still maybe suffer some from the morale penalty. With Aussies having 30 morale, you really just don't care at all about the Blood Rain. So
Yeah, it's only your mages that you're worried about, and even then, only if the opponent is also putting up Wailing Winds, which for
right.
Vaetti is a lot more expensive than it is for Shivalba.
Right. They need a very lucky air random Neefel Jarl to cast it. So, and they probably only have a few of them. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, and even then, and if you are with the right randoms. I know they have
Yeah.
at least one, but I don't know if they have multiple. And outside of
Right.
that, it really is just relying on empowerment.
Yeah.
Oh, and their god, of course, but
My first goal is studying the opponent. And I feel I'm mostly perceiving Kurt right. He's very meticulous and super rational. Very similar to myself, but likely more so. Well, and obviously he's super good at the game. He didn't defend any of his lands to see what was coming without risking too much. So, very small squads of troops with no mages, which is what I wanted to do initially, would have worked. But I think we ended up with this. But I think what we ended up with is better. He also lost a 30 gem assassin to my Water 3 Death 3 Ice Devil, but I didn't get any items. Now my expectation is assassinations, remote attacks, and other nasty stuff, which is why I'm mostly staying in place, patrolling with most raiding squads, and making some questionable moves that a very rational player should not normally expect from one in the finals turn 61. We'll see whether my prediction of his moves were right. Underestimation of wrong predictions did cost me a lot in the Marignon War. Shout out to you Marignon guys.
I like how
Okay.
positive Gas player is. That's Maven, right?
Right.
Yeah, so he's always been the super upbeat guy. He's one of the few people that can talk with some of the more belligerent folks in the Dominions community without like getting angry about the argument.
Yeah.
Just a very, very positive player, and it's fun to see that in the messages here as well.
Yeah. And certainly showing some respect. He's showing a lot of respect to Vaetti. He was trying to hide certain parts of his script, and certainly he's put a lot of thought into what Vaettiheim's going to do. And apparently he already did have some assassins, which I haven't read through these messages before, but hopefully we'll see from Vaettiheim here. But it is cool to see there's an assassin game happening, because that, in my opinion, is one of like the major strengths of Vaettiheim in the late mid game.
Yeah, because they can have as many assassins as they want.
Right. Speaking of my Doomstack, I wanted to see what was inside number 3 first and act based on that. Seeing that instead of evacuating, he reinforced his army with Rimvetti and mages, and I'm now expecting a gateway and or god drop inside the castle this turn as well. 7 gem provenance is better by far than anything that I have, and thus is apparently worth fighting for. So while I was planning to move my army towards Utgard and ignore this castle, number 3, now that I saw the value, I will stay. I'll reinforce and add my Wailing Winds caster, while still not showing everything and defending from assassins as much as I can. I don't expect him to break out with just 77 non-sneaking units. A bit risky, of course, well, as is everything in Dominions. P.S. Conjuration 9 in 2 turns for Ghost Riders and Whites to add more flexibility to the upcoming rigor cleansing play. I will be able to cast Whites at D10, which may not be as fancy as T&G's 20% Conjuration bonus, but still very good. Cool.
Yeah,
Whites are just great in the late game.
Yeah, just because they take buffs so well, it's hard to find troops that are both like great with combat sets, have magic weapons, and most importantly, have base armor, so that they can actually benefit from stuff like Army of Gold and Lead. Whereas units that just have high natural protection, like the Clockwork stuff or Mechanical Men, those guys only get a couple more protection, whereas Whites get the full benefit of the 20 base.
Yeah, and in addition, being undead, they are particularly adept at surviving any kind of rigor mortis play, which is what he's particularly worried about.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting in that they have their own explicit counters with wither bones, especially
Yeah,
communion wither bones being such a big deal. But at the same time, they also, as you pointed out, have their own immunities as well. So it kind of goes both ways, where it's got its ups and downsides.
yeah, and I think it's the kind of thing. If you lean super hard into it, it's easy to counter. But if you mix it in with your army, it's going to cover some gaps, which seems to be how he's thinking about it, which I like.
Yeah, and he didn't even mention Tartarians, which actually, like, even
Yeah,
if
that's kind of funny.
yeah, a fair number of them aren't going to be super useful, but even just having like a pile of hit points with fear is actually really valuable to stick in your armies.
Yeah, and they make very good. They actually do a lot of things, right? They can soak up Ravenous Swarm. They can soak up like a bunch of life for life casts and things like that. So there's a lot of really good uses for them, even if you're not making them commanders. So they do tend to get soul slayed pretty easily. They're
Yeah.
If you get the feeble minded ones, they're a soul slay magnet. So
They have the massive minus R penalty. Yeah.
yeah, it's like a 300 HP dude with 12 MR. The soul cast, the soul slay AI is like, meow. So, okay, and messages from Vaettiheim. So this was a crazy turn, down a lot of provinces. Notably, we pushed our research to the edge to hit cleansing this turn. See, this is how you know that he knows that he's talking to some casters that know what the fuck's up. Because he doesn't even say demonic cleansing. He knows that we know, and he knows that you as the audience know that that's what we're talking about.
It's funny though. It's also kind of funny that we kind of speculated that as well. That part of the reason that his deployment last turn was limited was that he really was pushing out that research, and we'd seen that on the research graph as well. That he hadn't been like doing a major mage withdrawal, and in fact he'd been telling everyone to hit the books. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I think you'd even called this in particular that the demonic cleansing was like the one thing that would make sense to go for.
Yeah, it's going to totally change how the war with Gath and Zabalba will go. Hopefully, now that he's got it, hopefully we see lots of really interesting budget things. I think, there's crazy things that Vaettiheim can do with demonic cleansing. First of all, it's super easy for them to cast, having a lot of water mages. But it turns like the Rim Vetti aura into like craziness against Aussies. Like, because they're going to take double damage from it. And I believe they have 5 cult resistance in the Bless. But that will not be enough. They'll still go to sleep very, very quickly next to Rim Vetti. So hopefully we see some really interesting plays around that. And then obviously for the big battles, it's going to be just huge.
Yeah, rigor mortis, of course, being the thing that we keep talking about, because it basically puts Aussies to sleep in like 5 hits.
Yeah, I mean, but it's everything too. It's not just that, but I mean, it's definitely that's a huge part of it. But it's also just like the berserk, all the units just hitting for double damage. It's so much. Like the berserkers all of a sudden become like 50 damage units. So
yeah, which actually matters given that demons tend to actually have really good HP values.
Yeah. Okay, they gave us options to choose in terms of defense, such as whether we wanted to gate into the Gath stack to defend on a fort storming. I don't have plans to do that, but it was good to hit that goal anyway. Now that our research goal is hit, a lot of mages are getting deployed. My research actually is a bit higher than I expected despite the deployment. I went from about 3,000 RP a turn to 1.7 thousand, so he's deploying about half his mages. But that's honestly because of the stationing mage areas where I will need to deploy troops after I wipe armies. Ideally, or because I frankly don't have the gems to deploy more mages and have them do anything useful. Well, I mean, Vaettiheim mages are so good at point buffing, I don't think you can ever have too many of them. I expected more Aussie raiding from Zabalba and less of the stealthy D2 raider guys. That one's annoying since they will likely stealth away. I'm attempting to retake territory this turn. I'm deploying a significant army towards Gath. If he moves upwards, I could potentially wipe or die on his big stack, but I suspect that his big stack will move to the left of my other fort, and his smaller force will impact my big setup. In theory, I believe my army there could win, but I'm not 100% sure of my capabilities. I have not had time to playtest any of the late-game Vaettiheim armies, so I'm pretty much winging it here, without a good idea of my own force projection. I'm also last-minute scripting a lot of stuff, as it's been a messy week and Al's been in and out. It's the start of the semester, his busiest time. At a certain point, my eyes start to glaze over. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's someone that likes testing quite a bit. So the fact that he's like out, not capable of doing that just by the time requirements for these late game turns is going to have a pretty serious impact, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I think for big army battles are very time intensive to set up and test. Most players do not do that in the late game. I am a sweaty tryhard and will like play test a lot of things. I generally do not do big late game army battle tests. I almost never do it. But things like killing thugs and super combatants and like raiding setups, I'll test those sort of things. But yeah, so I think that's normal. I think if anybody, maybe if it's like a game determining thing and somebody's moved an army on my fort and I'm like very unconfident whether I can destroy it, I might test it. But
yeah, I would say that's almost like where it's the highest impact is in these like decisive, massive battles. But you're right, it is a lot of effort.
it's a lot of effort, yeah. And the other thing too is like you have to like to do it properly, you want to look at like the scripts that all the mages have, right? So you're going to be looking at like for each mage, what are they casting? Where are they positioned? Are they on script or off script? You know, how many gems do they have? Match their gear up. It just is it's almost to really do it accurately. It's kind of like an infinite amount of time. You know, it'd be probably like 4 hours to properly get something fully, maybe not that much, but at least 2 hours to get something properly set up for like a major fight. And the problem you have with that is then players, especially in a high skill game, are going to be changing things up. Like we had Gath talking about, okay, I'm not going to show this, and then I'm going to show it, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like.
I mean, that's kind of how you counter testing.
Right.
Is just
Right.
switching the script. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Usually I can mitigate that by talking through the turns with someone. It helps my focus, I guess, but well, you got to do what you got to do. So this turn's pretty blind. I've got a lot of forces that I don't have scripting double checked or any real thoughts on how it will best be deployed, but it's the best I'm going to get at the moment. So wish me luck. Let's see how these bodyguard counter raiding groups go with Touch of Madness actually work. Great. I love this little trick. This trick with Touch of Madness tends to not work as great versus flyers, but it could work against some of the Gath stuff.
Yeah,
So,
because with flyers, they just kind of land before your big old buff script can finish.
yeah.
But yeah, Gath's raiding parties we haven't even really seen yet just because they had such a broad border that they were able to move in a significant number of like actual armies. So
Yeah.
we haven't even seen like what a light commitment little raiding force from Gath even looks like, really.
Yeah. Okay. And then a final message, and we'll get to the battles. These Physmos Rimvetti perform crazy well. P.S. These Physmos Rimvetti perform crazy well. I need more temp gem items like lenses to make them cheaper to deploy. Yeah, that's probably to get quickness without having water twos. But no.
Or quickening,
It's
Wave Warriors.
Wave
Yeah.
Warriors, yeah, that's what it's for. Yeah. In my opinion, the Wave Warriors deployments are for essentially like medium to large commitments. Like it's when you're doing like 40 or 50 Rimvetti that you'll whip out that. But we'll see how he uses it.
Yeah. And yeah, he's mentioning how he's using it right out here. That
Yeah.
he's keeping most of them hidden. He's got a reserve stack in his capital. It makes total sense.
And you don't get to see a lot of my stealthy stuff, but I counted about 320 Rimvetti. I'm trying to be careful to deploy them in such a way to keep them all from guessing where they might pop up. One stack of 100 is reserved at my capital for the Ice Devil to gate where needed. I don't want to lose any to remote spells if I can avoid it, or Pan's Bone Grinder God. They're pretty resistant to remote spells. You know, like they have a crazy amount of protection in Cold 3. So, yeah, I don't know.
And of course,
They're not
covering winter isn't going to hurt them.
right. They're pretty hard in Cold 3, I think, to hit with Flames from the Sky. I mean, we'll see what their protection is this turn. But it's going to be 14 AP damage against it, so we'll see how many it would take to kill.
The damage on Flames from the Sky scale with the fire level?
It does. So yeah, you could have a really high caster. I think you get one per.
It's base 15 and then +1 per extra level. Yeah. So like a Fire King with 3 boosters, which is like the generic stuff that's not a Ring of Wizardry, right? It's like Elemental Staff, and then the 2 Fire boosters. That guy's casting for 18 AP. So against a 20 protection Rim Vaetti, it should kill them about half the time. And even when it doesn't, they'll go into battle with very low hit points.
Okay. All right, so let's look. We've got a huge horror attack here on a large Vaettiheim stack. Or not huge.
How many lesser horror casts is that actually?
It looks like 3.
Okay, yeah, that's not so bad. It looks like he just rolled multiple, so it looks bigger.
Yeah.
That's like, what is that, 21? How much is lesser horror?
Yeah. It's 9 per.
9,
so,
okay, so 27.
Yeah. But the idol of sorceries here, which is very interesting. And this one's got some very interesting kit. Oh, a ring of wizardry on this guy. Wow. So this might have been a gateway.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah, 'cause that's the only thing that would justify putting the ring on that.
Yeah.
On that Jotun.
So this was in Fungwood. Let's see if we have a battle here in Fungwood.
So there was, yeah. Okay, so Vaetti actually anticipated this, possibly even thinking there was an even bigger stack, and pulled in their god and gatewayed in stuff using that Gaija. So this is a very expensive defense from Vaettiheim.
Right.
Like, just the gems to get here are expensive.
Right. Gateway's 10, and then the god was teleport, and then, all the gems he spent in this. If the mages on the Gath side don't have any gear, which I don't think they did, then I think this actually is a kind of good trade for Gath, even though he gets his stuff wiped. Yeah, he didn't lose any gear, and he lost,
3 cubes.
This
is actually a pretty small commitment, yeah.
Yeah. I think you don't really mind losing this to this Vaettiheim army here. I do like that Vaettiheim's using Magic Phase army stuff. That's really cool. He's got Unfrozen too, which is interesting. Cold Power, huh?
Yeah, those are from Hidden in Snow. That's
an interesting thing to mix in. Okay.
Well, gives you more auras. They have really good combat stats in the cold, which might also be part of it. And then, of course, just having more high HP undead can help tank some stuff if you have like high value white mages or whatever that you need to protect from the anti-undead spells.
Yeah, that's true. So this is kind of interesting. This Vaettiheim had a stealthy group of guys here, and then he cloud trap pieces this guy in to trigger a magic phase attack, where this guy's supported by the stealthy dudes who are already in the province. And because this Chillin was leading Aussies, he couldn't stealth out. It looks like he gets sniped early, and then the Aussies are going to run.
Yeah, that's a good way to actually fight against these highly mobile raiding parties, is you basically just create a magic phase attack. And with a big stealth nation like Vaettiheim, you can bring, as he did here, a very significant number of stealth troops without needing to spend a whole lot on the actual magic phase movement.
Yeah, it's one of the things that Vaettiheim can, I think, take a ton of value out of. Like, we haven't seen it yet, but they can also do like point buffing squads hidden that are set up to buff like their idol of sorcery. And you can, stack a lot of buffs on the idol that it might not be able to cast otherwise. So, including things we were just talking about, like Wave Warriors you could cast on it, or, Moss Body, obviously. And, I have to think what the other ones would all be. But you basically stack a lot of buffs on them.
Yeah, or even just do that with a regular squad.
Yeah. Okay, then we have a few more horror attacks. Oh, this is painful.
Yeah,
loses 3 Gaijas.
Yeah, these Captain Gaijas are going to be more and more valuable as the game goes on. It looks like these are just blood hunting, actually.
Yeah.
Which is
it's a pretty low value. The things, I think there's a few uses for these, for the Cap Gaijas. Their main use, in my opinion, is they're your best ritual casters. They're going to have the best paths. So things like Sinless or Horror, stuff like that, you can kind of roll for some good ones. They're also your Turbo Communion batteries, potentially, if you want to set that up. And then they're also your most reliable, though they're not stealthy. So if you're not moving around with like a stealthy army, they're your most reliable casters. If you have some important spell you want to go off, get off, you have to worry about like nukes and stuff less with these guys. So
yeah, they're also valuable for fighting in terrain. just because the damage that you take from casting in Drain, for those very high fatigue spells like Howl at least, you can actually kill Vaetti. Like they cast the spell and
Right.
instantly explode. So Gaijas are valuable for that too.
God,
And
these brass
Gath
claws
is,
are so good. These
yeah,
are just these are such good units.
and Gath is Drain 3 actually, so it is like a serious consideration, assuming he can actually defend himself and start pushing back. That he might need some Gaijas for big battlefield spells just to have the caster survive and not get afflicted.
Yeah. All right, and this is the last of the magic phase attacks. Just goes into 1 or 2 PD here. We've got let's go to the map here. So, well, let me make sure I'm gonna pause and we'll scan through if there's any battles. Okay, we went and looked through. There's no more huge battles, so we're safe to do this from the map. So let's do the Zabalba front. So last turn, I think it was on this fort, a big Zabalban force was repelled, but here he sent in some very small Aussie raiders, very low commitment, pretty low commitment.
Yeah, the fact that he hit that same province again is actually pretty clever, just because oftentimes there's like a psychological thing of like where, oh, we've already fought here, they're not going to attack here again. Similar to how, like, if your enemy has an army in motion, attacking into the province that the enemy force is in now is very frequently going to work, just because they're going to be trying to move it around, and if you attack it like where they are now, then they'll have moved out by the time you get there.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is kind of interesting. Let's see if he's done Touch of Madness on these guys. Yeah, he has. So these guys are running in. It's a bunch of berserked, moss-bodied. Does he have Fizz-Moss on them? No. Just Moss-Body.
Yeah, Fizz-Moss is the one that requires the bigger commitment, just because you need a booster.
Yeah. And this is not the kind of force I would expect to have Fizz-Moss on it. So, pretty cool. Very good trade for him. Kills 3 Aussies and 2 mages. And these guys also had blood slaves on them, so that's an extra little bonus. Not these provinces, I believe, were taken from Vaettiheim, and he hasn't raided them back. Oh, this was the magic phase attack where he took that, and then Zabalba moved. So this was interesting. So this army, magic phased in, killed these guys. These were going to go move and raid elsewhere. And then instead, Zabalba was moving these guys in to defend. And so these guys also ran into the magic face attack now. Doing Horde of Skeletons spam. This was supposed to be like Horde of Skeletons behind PD.
There wasn't that much PD in the province to begin with, but it looks like that was set up to kind of counter just very, very light raiding. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's 7 PD.
Yeah, this would be assuming Vaettiheim would try to take it with like maybe 5 guys and a commander to fluff them or something.
Yeah, which is often what I would expect as a baseline commitment for like a counter raiding force. Is you basically just want to retake these provinces as cheaply as possible.
Yeah. So this is now quite a few mages have died this turn from Zabalba. He's lost 3 in this province. He's lost 2 in this province. That's 5 total. He's lost 2 more here. We'll go ahead and see this. What's happening?
And these mage losses are actually very impactful because they need these guys, because those are both the blood hunters, so they're valuable for the economy, but they're also the researchers, right? And Zabalba is very behind on research, so all these mages that he's losing are guys that are not going to be reading books. That's like minus 10 RP per turn forever.
Yeah, and Zabalba started blood hunting so early that their income is pretty low considering their size. And they're not really that big either. So they really do need, like these gold losses do matter to them a lot.
Yeah, and these 3-path mages are 14 RP each. So like it's very significant to lose them in Magic 3, I mean.
Yeah, and this guy's $200, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's significant. This one, they don't manage to kill
but it
came out, but he dies in the retreat. Yeah. So there's another one down. So almost 10 Zabalba mages down this turn.
Yeah, 140 RP lost forever per turn.
Okay, some ill winter action. And then they stormed this fort. So it's interesting. I think they obviously had a much bigger force on top. And I like this move here from Vaettiheim. From Zabalba a lot. They're storming with a really low commitment. So Vaettiheim clearly could have magic phase stuff inside of this fort, like we saw them gateway and, send their god. And that stuff would have, if he had gatewayed an army in here, would have defended against this. And it probably would have defended against the full army. So Zabalba's like, okay, if you don't gateway something, I'll send enough to kill it. But if you do gateway something, I'm sending a little enough stuff. I won't be upset if it dies.
Yeah, and that's just a solid play in general, I'd say, is using like these small commitment things to storm. It's much smarter to do it this way, in my opinion, rather than just use like the solo commander to check what's inside, because it keeps your tempo up. So like if
Right.
they aren't actually defending, then you do still want to be able to capture the fort.
Yeah. And they moved speaking of keeping the tempo up, they moved the army, which had popped this fort, onto this fort now. And so now this throne fort is popped, and Vaettiheim's going to have to make another decision. Okay, do I defend this one or not?
Yeah, I expect Zabalba to do pretty much the same thing. Because that army can't be magic phased on, right? Because it's a Vaettiheim fort. I mean, it can be hit by horrors and like Dark Riders and so on, I suppose. But whatever's going to be gatewaying or teleporting into it isn't going to be fighting that army directly. So they can just do the same thing where they send like a relatively small subsection of their army, and then if they want to, they can even move the main army onto another fort, like the one that they raided 2 provinces north.
Right. So this one does. I wouldn't be surprised to see a huge army pop out of this one next turn, just because this was where the corpses are freshly unburied from the last conflict here. Okay, so that's that. And it's interesting here. I don't think we have any bumps between Gath and Zabalba, so they've been coordinating pretty well, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, the coordination doesn't even need to be that complicated. Just Zabalba saying, hey, I'm hitting this list of provinces, and Gath saying,
right.
Okay.
So we have a Gaija. This actually is a great combo. We have a Gaija and a giant shaman.
Yes, the giant shaman is a transformed Vaetti Gaija, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a Vaetti Gaija. And presumably twice formed as well, so it'll come back in the Tartarian form.
The problem, though, is he's being attacked by somebody with a lifelong protection, and he's only got 1 attack. So he's never going to be able to kill these things fast enough.
Yeah, but if he goes Berserk, then he can turn timer it. It's just a matter of actually taking damage.
Right. And that may be what happens, because... Oh, this is Malika. So this is one of those great kits. Actually, this is the exact kit. It's the Black... I think I talked about this in an episode or 2 ago. It's the Black Tower Shield, which has a really high parry value, so it's going to block all the arrows, and then a lifelong protection.
Yeah, and I really love using the Malakim as your LLP carriers, just because, yeah, I mean, it's something we talked about before. They're just super mobile, they're stealthy, they can become assassins in a pinch. Just the perfect carrier for these sorts of things.
Yeah. And this guy's got regen, so there's no way he's dying. So he is going to time this battle out. As a side benefit, this actually might be good for Vaettiheim, because this guy's going to get a tremendous amount of experience. Yeah. So he's going to get like +3 to all his stats from this fight.
Yeah, he's already in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Although on the other hand, he's also at 100 fatigue, so he's not actually going to be staying berserk because he doesn't have enough reinvigoration.
Right. That's true.
So yeah, he actually can route in
being
berserker.
Right, but these guys aren't going to run until the other guy does. But the other guy's going to fly out, so he's probably still going to...
Yeah,
he doesn't win the province. Okay, but that guy, yeah. The PD was what saved it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, he's back here, so he didn't die in the retreat, so that's nice. Did the Gaija die? The Gaija didn't die either, so cool.
I think the Gaija was scripted to retreat.
Right. But I was thinking with the lifelong protection, it's pretty risky trying to retreat out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've seen this, yeah. So, and then another Malika down here. So this is where the interesting moves were going to happen. So Gath had a Lich here. Was this a Wind of Death Lich? Had slaves. What is this? Oh, he's using Blood Slaves as Soul Vortex batteries. That's kind of cool. It's an interesting little trick.
Yeah, they're also helpful just because they stand still and they have low protection, so they draw arrow fire and stuff.
Yeah. And then here, what happens? So this Vaettiheim breaks out. So I think he thought this army was going to move off this fort. Oh no, he tries retreating. And most of them escape, but then Gath storms, but with just a smattering of dudes, and there's nothing in here. So this might not be enough. This was a gym bait.
Oh yeah,
But,
yeah. But it might not have even worked for that purpose because you scripted to retreat.
yeah, I don't think it actually would have worked. Maybe it did. Or maybe it would have. I think have 4 gems. Maybe it was 3 though. There's 3 or 4 different ways to gem bait, and maybe it was the one where you add the item and the gems and the magic paths, and it is greater than a certain number.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like the contrary setup to what Shivalba had done, where Geth could have stormed that fort, right? Like he would have won if he sent in like a medium-sized squad, and he has enough stuff on that fort that I think it would have been worthwhile. Like, you know, you just spend in 20 of your Levites or whatever. That would work.
Yeah, so this army, Vaetti was planning on this. So this is where he magic phased in all that stuff. So he was thinking this army was going to move up, which would help it position to get closer to Utgard. Great. So he was anticipating this whole army coming here, and he was like, all right, let's have a fight. Well, now this is an interesting situation because now Gath makes a decision. Do they stay here and fight? Do they move into this army that they know is present? Do they move on to this fort to get closer to Utgard? Or do they back off? And it's going to be, I think it's really hard as Vaetti to predict which one they're going to do. But I think your move as Vaetti probably is pretty predictable. Like you're in you're being coalitioned. You need to take a fight. I think if you're Vaetti, you just have to run into this. And anytime you get predictable moves like this, it kind of sucks.
I think you can't run into that anymore because the idol sorcery is magic phase only. And the rest of the army can't magic phase. Or, yeah, if they move onto the fort, then that means they're fighting outside the walls.
I think they can. It depends. This isn't actually quite as many mages as I thought. I don't know if Vaetti can win with this few mages.
Yeah, but like not only that, but they also like physically are incapable of bringing the idol and all of the rest of the army to fight together.
Well, they could bring the army. They just wouldn't be able to bring the idol.
Yeah, but they're not going to do that. Like there's not enough mage support there for that. The idol is definitely the wild card in that battle.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're going to try to teleport the idol inside of that breached fort.
It's so hard for me to. I haven't actually really tried like min-maxing this. I mean, I assume gifts from heaven and stuff would kill it, but this is pretty. Let's take a look at this idol again. I believe this is the colorful one. It's got air, so it could do Wrathful Skies. I could do Soul Drain.
Father Illich on Advanced and Cast will kill it with Shatter, though. Like Gath has Earth Magic.
Well, he is Father Illirth.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it could certainly die, but a big army, it's going to make Soul Drain do a lot, right? So like Soul Drain, Soul Vortex, Wrathful Skies, Astral Tempest. I mean, I don't know all the things, and then you have it fluffed up with a mage, right? So it's going to have a slash resistance, Moss Body. Iron Skin's not going to do much here, but yeah, I don't know. I think you're right. I think it's probably not possible for this guy to survive the army. And I don't think he has Soul Drain yet. But if he did, it might be possible.
Yeah, the one thing that I could think of is that if he does have enough spare priests where he can just call it back instantly, then it might be worth doing it anyways, just because the damage that the god can do might be worth like the mage turns to call it back.
Yeah, that's true. Though you start losing a few of these paths, and it starts becoming harder to do things like Wrathful Skies and Soul Drain. So
yeah, it's always a risk because you aren't guaranteed to lose a path, and you can gain a bonus point in death, right? So
that's true. But I think you're right. I think unless there's some, and we don't know. This is Vaetti has had these forts for a long time. There could be a lot of Vaetti Gaijas around. If he has, let's say, 20 more Vaetti Gaijas, I could see him taking a fight. And he kind of needs to. But the thing is, I think the real question is mage support and how much does he have?
Yeah, the problem though is really just going to be getting stuff into the battle, because if he has Gaijas, they're not inside that fort right now, which means that he can't teleport in the idol and have mage support unless the mage is already in the fort, right? And
I mean taking a battle outside the fort. Just move the army, move the Gaijas, and ride out. Ride with me, brothers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's rough. I think that he would basically need to already be fully prepared for that. Like, he would need to, be ready to take that fight now. And given that he teleported all that stuff into the province just north of it, it doesn't look like he's there right now. I would guess he doesn't take a fight next turn. Or at least not into that big gas stack.
Yeah, I would think he. I don't know. I think you're probably right, just kind of judging from how he's playing. But I like if it were my Vaetti position, I would think I would have 20 Vaetti Geiges in the area, and I would try to. I mean, I would try to figure out a way to make this work. Let's take a look at this army.
Yeah,
Really examine it.
This is the other thing which I actually really wanted to get to is looking at what this gas stack has, because obviously it has some very heavy mage support in terms of blood slave cost. Like, he has a bunch of uniques. It looks like 2 archdevils. Okay, so that was what I was the Earth King. Yeah, he's got 2.
So he's set up to do Army of Gold, and
he's got the Water Queen there as well. I'm not sure what she's casting. Probably like Frostfen, maybe Niffle Flames.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, this army is very, very high spec.
He's got an artificial Matrix Communion too, which it means you can expect turn 1 craziness potentially.
Yeah, and that's super high value. Just if there are any buffs that you can't cast natively with your very big mages, then yeah, having your matrices to do it is also really good. So interestingly, he has 2 Air Queens from the looks of it. Not in this army.
I can't seem to find him. Oh, here's one.
But like, if you look at the summons that are in the army, he has a permanent air elemental just north of it's in the seer stack at the north. There's a permanent air elemental in there, which means he's got one of the queens, right? And then he's got the Sylph, which is a different queen.
Right, yeah.
Which means he has at least 2 of the 3.
Well, one of them's here. So the Queen of Storms, I forget what does she get? She gets the
air elementals, I believe.
Yeah.
So here's what I think. One, which is, I think, the Queen of Clouds.
Here's what I think. I think this army is turn 1 mass flight. That's my guess. This does look more like Fog Warriors, but I think it's turn 1 mass flight. Don't let Vaettiheim point buff and just jump on him.
Well, the problem with that is that any Vaettiheim Doomstack is going to have a Storm Staff.
Well, that's what I think the key thing is. They have to have a Storm Staff. So,
given that they need that for fighting Xibalba anyways, I think it makes sense to just have it. Right? Like, I don't think that... Yeah. And then the other thing is that
but they may need it for Xibalba, right? Like, if they... Like, it's like if you have 2 fights you need to take against Xibalba and Gath, you only have 1 Storm Staff, where do you put it?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
I just don't know if Xibalba or if Vaettiheim is in a position to fight 2 Doomstacks simultaneously.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is not going to be easy to fight. This is going to have relief up almost certainly. It's going to have Army of Gold. It's going to have Wheel of Fates. It's going to have Mass Flight. It's going to have Fog Warriors. Potentially, it could have Weapons of Sharpness and Earthquake spam. We'd have to really go through, like if I were fighting against Gath here, I'd probably need to take 20 minutes and just look at what's on each of the commanders and try to figure this out. And then we also, on top of this, Gath is trying to still hide some things. So...
Weapons of Sharpness in particular is a really big deal against the Physmos stuff, because it's kind of the only way that you can get your regular troops to deal enough damage to pop Moss Body.
Yeah. And these guys are just going to hit so freaking hard. With the Strength of Giants, whether it's Rush of Strength or what have you.
31 hitting damage, yeah.
Yeah. And then Weapons of Sharpness. It's going to be a lot. And it's going to be pretty hard. Do we see the Bless here? Let's remind ourselves and the viewers what the Bless is. 10 cold resistance. So they are going to be, even with like demonic cleansing up, they're going to be immune to the Rim Vettiaras. So there's, with 5, you can be like, okay, we'll get through we'll eventually fatigue them out. That's not really going to be the case here. Yeah, this is going to be a really hard army to fight. And that, I love seeing this though, because this is one of the things that Gath does. It's best in class, is it's got some of the best Doomstacks in the game, and this is a great Doomstack. So, all right, and then the Pangean front. Let's see. I don't think we have much action. You got a
You
little bit
cut out
there.
for a second there.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't hear anything you said in the past minute if you've been talking.
Yeah, I think that was just an internet thing.
Yeah. Here, I'll pause. What were you saying about Vaetti in the past minute, or the Vaetti Gath thing?
Oh, basically just talking about Yath's Doomstack potential, but you basically covered it, so I think we're fine.
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of cool. Some of this over the next few turns, because we're going to see Tianchi fight Pangea, and we're going to see Pangea fighting Vaetti. As you and I have been talking at length, Pangea has not been making troops. They have been making sages.
Yeah, and they haven't been summoning troops, so they don't have any of
Right.
their like elites or even something like cubes that can deal with elites particularly well. They're
Yeah.
basically strictly reliant on having so many astral mages that they can just deal with the enemy army, whether that's in slave spam or solo rays or however it is that you get rid of the enemies one at a time. Because astral is quite good at that, but it can be a very tall order.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to see what they have planned because I've never seen Pangea played quite like this. I mean, these are really great troops, obviously, but you see these red caves, these backs of these pans are these centaur sages. That's going to carry this nation, or at least that's their plan. And I'm looking to just see how they're planning on taking these like super heavy, like centaur sage like fights. Like, what's the plan?
I mean, honestly, the only thing that I can think of is what I mentioned before, where you just bring 80 astral mages. And if you're casting 40 enslaved minds per round with very high pen values, then, you're going to do fine regardless.
Yeah.
But this is not that. This is like, I mean, it's kind of like what he was deploying against TNG. It's just not enough to beat a committed defense where the enemy is actually using mages and gems and items and all that good stuff. Like you really do need to make a similar commitment to what your enemy's doing. And if you want to make that commitment just be piles of your gold recruited wizards, you can do that. You're allowed to get away with that because you have the super efficient astral mages. But you need to bring enough in order to actually make up for that value. Otherwise, you need to start, using items of your own, spending gems of your own, because you otherwise just aren't matching what your enemy is committing to these fights. So, like, this isn't even though, like, if you look at the battle report, it looks like Pangea brought 10 mages, and Vaetti also has exactly 10 mages, so it looks fair. But no, this is a very, very small commitment from Pangea, where Vaetti has a much more serious defense. I mean, as you point out, or as you kind of just showed there, their mages cost twice as much, and they require more infrastructure to recruit as well, and on and on. But then they also, like, deployed the lifelong protection. They have much more province defense, they have much more troops. So Pangea just needs to match the level of commitment to the folks that they're fighting, and until they do that, they're going to keep losing these battles.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. I think you're right. This is pretty low commitment from Pan, but we still haven't really seen how, like, he's got a plan, right? We have to see what it is, because this is not going to work just doing this.
And it's kind of a lot to throw away, honestly. Like it's not a lot of there are the cubes. Okay, he's finally
got
started,
some cubes.
Finally started summoning them. But yeah, look, it's not a lot to use, right? Like it is a low commitment for like an attack team, but it is a lot to lose for free.
Right. Okay. Another raid failed here. Just some centaur cataphracts by a harpy.
Yeah, one of the nice things about Black Harpies is that in addition to being hypermobile and recruit out of any force and all the other good things that make them the best scouts in the game, they also have leadership. So you can also use them to lead little raiding parties if you don't happen to have a commander around.
Yeah. Okay, kills a couple Gath vampires. What's interesting is I don't think we've seen, except for maybe that. Maybe we look at that Vaetti Doomstack again, because one thing I was going to say is I was expecting to see some Wave Warriors, and I don't think we've seen that yet.
The interesting thing to me is that these vampires cast Life for Life at the start.
Yeah, they were probably expecting thugs, so.
But they ran into troops instead.
They ran into troops. Did we see Wave Warriors here? Let's take a look. This might not trigger gym use, actually. I probably should have looked at the other one.
No, they did cast Wailing Winds. I see what you mean. This one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wave Warriors cast. Yep, it's up. If you look at the
Oh yeah,
log
this
there.
guy's got it. This guy did it. Yeah, this is a spooky dude. Look at this guy. 28 protection, 22 defense. He's quickened. He's got weapons of sharpness. We don't have. Oh no, he's got the strength buff too.
Yeah, Wave Warriors, the one downside is it does give -4 strength, and to a
Right.
Rim that matters.
Yeah, but they're still going to be absolute monsters. I mean, basically impossible to kill. And regen. Yeah, I mean, this was the army that was right next to Gath. I could see this army maybe taking the fight, but yeah, it's going to be hard. I mean, each of those guys is like a little thug, so.
Yeah. Well, we kind of talked about that before in terms of like the value of the super point buff stacks.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that covers that. Anything you want to say in closing on the Vaettiheim front?
I mean, man, Vaetti fits on one screen now. Like, this is a small nation now. Their province graph has, in that first round, just the absolute destruction of their province count. And even now that they're like pushing back, it's continued to fall further. Like they are out of contention if they don't, suddenly retake a lot of this lost ground.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying with like they really need to fight that Gath army. Like they kind of need to ride out. So we'll see what they actually do.
It's one of those feels bad things though, because I don't think Vaetti did anything wrong in particular. They basically got voted out of this game.
Well, I mean, this first jump happened because they were trying to get demonic cleansing, right? And so they didn't mobilize a lot of mages. They didn't really do their province defense game. And the problem sort of is once you get behind, it's hard to kind of spring back from that. Like if you lose half your land, it's really hard to like come back out swinging because now you're potentially raiding into PD and all these other things. You
also just lose the golden gems, right? Like,
right.
Every province that you lose is like a 100+ gem swing.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, the same sort of thing happened to TNG.
But they were able to get out of it, yeah.
But they were able to get out of it. And it's possible. I think that's the thing I kind of want to talk about is TNG's, by betting to join Vaettiheim, they certainly haven't made everybody else happy, like Erythia and Gath and Pangea and Zabalba. They've probably made them angry. And they're kind of betting on Vaettiheim surviving. So this doesn't look great for TNG. It's just like if Vaettiheim falls apart, it's pretty logical the next move is going to be them going on TNG too. But
yeah, or going on TNG again. You could say. I feel like we also kind of talked about this last episode that Erythia and Shabalba are the ones that are kind of going to be on the outs with the big two in that alliance if they basically stay on the coalition who those guys are coalitioning train. So it might be worth it for them long term to switch sides as well.
Yeah. Yep. So he's doing real well. So Gath is up a lot of provinces. He's position 1 now.
He had already kind of been position 1 though.
Yeah. We'll see. If Gath wins a major fight against Vaettiheim and takes the Utgard region, he's going to be just looking real grand. Pangea, kind of what is now typical for them, is not really making much hay here. They're kind of just stagnant while other people are doing the heavy commitment fighting.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of just goes to what you're alluding to with the commitment thing of like if you want to make major gains, you need to actually deploy enough troops and mages to win battles, which Pangea just has not been doing. But I mean, you can kind of see, like, I mean, as you show on the screen right here, they're really more set up to fight TNG. So it looks like to them, the Vaettiheim War is a sideshow. They'll grab the free stuff while Vaettiheim's distracted, but their real focus is going to be on committing to this TNG war.
Right. And there's a lot of fronts for the TNG war. There's down here where Pangea had lost a bunch of stuff before, and TNG has a lot of stuff. So we'll see how that goes. And then there's this side of this lake, which is probably going to be the main theater. And then there's a secondary theater up here. So that'll be interesting. And I think that's it. I don't think we really have much more to look at here. What are your closing thoughts here? I mean, we've probably talked this to death.
The one last thing I guess that I'd want to say is looking at the army positioning for TNG, because we know that the next turn is when hostilities can begin. They still have these very, very major commitments. But if you also look at that farm, they also have all their ancestor vessels over there. So it looks like TNG is going to wait for Pangaea to make the first move. That's kind of what my read is on that. Because that army is not hidden, right? Like, because Pangaea owns that lake, they can see that, so it's not going to be like a surprise reinforcement if they go run it into that fort over on their border. So it looks like Pangaea or TNG is trying to not have their entire army trapped inside of that palisade if Pangaea takes it in the opening rounds of the war.
Yeah. Yeah, and he probably wants some flexibility where to deploy it, because these guys are going to be pretty mobile. They can map move 2 and defend, a lot of these provinces. And they can also defend if there's a major commitment from above the lake.
Yeah, so I think it makes sense for him to keep it there. It's kind of telling that in this upcoming turn, which we haven't, or at least I haven't looked at yet, it's like TNG's positioning here shows that they're kind of letting the enemies make the first move, and then they're planning on responding based on what the attacks from Pangaea and Arithi actually look like.
Yeah, the other thing too is we're entering the phase in the game where you start having to worry about flames from the sky and things like that, and these ancestor vessels certainly are not immune from it. Oh. So I'm sure TNG is also very cautious about grouping things up too much, where they can get nuked down.
It might be dome related. Like if he already has an air dome and a forest dome up in that fort, then it might be cheaper to just keep them there and then, put up the astral dome there as well, rather than pay for adding those domes to the outlying forts as well.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you so much for joining me again, Sai.
Absolutely. Thanks for hosting.
And viewers, thank you so much if you made it to the end. And why don't we haven't done a viewer request in a while. Why don't you put in the comments who do you think is going to win right now? Who are you putting in at the top? Let me know. And we'll see you next time. Take care.